Okay. Hi, my name is R.T. Brown. I'm with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and I'm filling in for Sarah Lang, who heads up our Southern Vermont Economy Project. This is an installment of Knowledge Bites, which is a series, a webinar series that happens every second and fourth Tuesday of every month. So thank you for joining us. Today we have Ed Williams from PTAC, or the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. That's a mouthful. And he's going to tell you all about what PTAC does and how it can connect your business with potential government contracts. Ed has been with PTAC since May of 2012. He comes to the program with a background in architecture, construction, and it has served as a construction litigation expert, not witnessing, but as an expert. I'm not doing too well here. Construction litigation expert, witnessing, and construction management consulting. Now that's a mouthful. Ed has owned his own consulting business in Vermont, and has spent 15 years working for corporate architecture firms in Massachusetts and California. As a small business owner and has worked with architecture firms, he developed a broad knowledge of business, marketing, project identification, and acquisition techniques. He holds a degree from the Boston Architectural College. So, Ed, thank you for joining and taking some time and talking to us about PTAC and the services that are offered with PTAC. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, RT, and please reach out to the other folks at the BDCC and SEVED's group and let them know I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. And I think that this Knowledge Bites experiment or continuing opportunity is a great thing for Vermont businesses. Today, rather than dig into everything that PTAC does, I really want to talk about the SBIR and STTR programs for innovative research and product development. And SBIR stands basically for Small Business Innovation Research. The original goals of the SBIR program really surrounded around stimulating technological innovation, fostering and encouraging participation by socially, economically disadvantaged business, and those that are 51% owned and controlled by women, disadvantaged businesses, as well as what's known as other small businesses. They also really wanted to increase private sector commercialization of innovations derived from federal R&D efforts, thereby increasing competition and productivity. Now that's the big story on that. The great thing about the SBIR program, and we're going to see it as we go through, is that every government agency in the U.S. government has some sort of SBIR program available, and gives up to $250,000 of grants or contracts for a phase 1, and even more for a phase 2, depending on how you go through. So keep that in the back of your mind, that this is really a great opportunity, and has been intended to be a great opportunity to stimulate innovation and to move innovation from thought to prototype to development of manufacturing and distribution. In 1982, the goals actually expanded and has become really, like I spoke of, seed capital for early stage R&D, and they as they were looking at phase 1 and phase 2 applications. I do want to mention at this time that these slides will be available afterwards on the website along with the recording for the Knowledge Bites web portal. The SBIR and STTR programs have 3 phases. There's the submission phase, the award phase, and then once you get into submission and reward, they look at future market potential. Once the award is made, you go into a 3-phase program as well, which is the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the SBIR, and each have a different type of requirements. Phase 1 basically is the concept phase. It lasts 6 to 9 months and supports exploration of the technical merit or feasibility of the idea or technology. So it's your, what do I want to do? Phase 2 awards can last up to 2 years and expand based on the phase 1 results. If it's determined that your phase 1 concept, the development of that concept, is something that the government wants to pursue or someone within the government wants to pursue, they can bump you up to a phase 2. During that time, the R&D work is actually performed up to and until you get through and into prototype. Phase 3 is the next step from the lab into the marketplace. Now, there are no SBIR funds for this phase, but small businesses might find funding in the private sector or secure it from other non-SBIR federal agencies. I will mention at this time that very often the same government entities that award the phase 1 and phase 2 do often recommend prime contractors, other federal agencies, manufacturers to the small business that get phase 1 and 2 so that they can move into and partner with these folks to get into the marketplace. Very often you get moved over to a Boeing, or for just a large example, a Boeing or someone to the Elbit or somebody large like that that has a great small business program that is really looking to move innovation forward. What are the goals of the STTR program? We've talked about this already a little bit. The real goal is to facilitate the transfer of technology developed by a research institution through the entrepreneurship of a small business concern. It's also referred to, it includes federal universities and federal funding, research and development centers, also referred to as FFRDCs. That's important to remember because it's going to be coming up again in a little bit. The other thing is that it is really meant to dig out this innovation from small businesses and give small businesses a chance, because the government sincerely believes that many opportunities and many innovations have been missed because small businesses don't have the funding or the ability to get to the manufacturing with the larger contractors and primes. Here are some of the agencies with SBIR, STTR programs to give you an idea of the budgets that they have. Department of Defense being number 1, for example, with $1.07 billion of budget to spend on SBIRs. Another one that's notable, even the Department of Agriculture, $20.3 million. Health and Human Services at $797 million. That includes the National Institute of Health, NIH, as well as NSF, the National Science Foundation. There's also NASA, has a $180.1 million budget. So you can begin to see when you go down through this list, and these aren't even all the agencies, that there is a significant amount of money into and able to tap into from each of these agencies. To succeed, how do we get these and what do we do? The first and critical piece is that your research needs to be innovative. They don't want to see just upgrades to existing technology. Like I've got a cassette player, for example, and instead of having a standard case on it, it's got a non-breakable case. You've got to have or it comes in blue now. You're going to have a real significant upgrade to say the cassette player, where say it becomes voice activated or something like that. Second is a desire on your part to develop a viable product that you want to bring to the marketplace. Just wanting to do research isn't enough. The government wants to see that your research is going to be commercialized or turned into a useful product that they can use, so that your firm will promote either directly or through a variety of commercialization strategies. Now, when we talk about SBIs and STTR budgets for the agencies, some of these agencies give out contracts. Some of these give out with grants. This is important to know because there are some differences in how they are awarded based on grants versus contracts. HHS and NSF actually do a bit of both, even though it doesn't really show here. And these contracts and grants in this program are more located on another site than your typical grants.gov grants. These are a whole different animal. So what is the difference between the vehicles? Here are the real solid differences here. One thing in particular, when you've got a grant, the principal investigator, the lead investigator, really has more freedom in defining the scope and can actually work with their contracting officer or granting entity to actually develop what the scope of that work is going to be. Whereas with a contract, the agency says, this is what we want you to do, come to us with solutions, and then they pick various entities to propose solutions and research solutions, and then from there they go into phase 2. Grants, for example, allow for questions and answers about the solicitation or the topic before the actual solicitation comes out, whereas grants, you can only do questions and answers during a public period, so everybody's going to know your questions early on in your research and can retweak their own research. So these are some of the real differences between the two. What is the difference? Again, there's two keys, really. An STTR project requires a small business to be teamed with a nonprofit. So that's key to remember, to be teamed with a nonprofit, and that's typically a university or a federal laboratory. Also, STTR programs are focused on the transfer of technology from the research institution. This is also referred to as the RI, to the small business and ultimately to the marketplace through a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So what that really does is your intellectual property with an STTR more often than not is shared with the government and with the research institution. Whereas with SBIRs, you really maintain, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. The SBIRs, you don't remain, you have a, oh, no, I'm right. STTRs, you have that, you have to come up with the allocation of the IP prior to award. With SBIRs, you don't. You own the intellectual property with an SBIR. There are 11 agencies participating in the SBIR program. There's 5 in the STTR program. And both, the only people that are allowed to apply for these are the actual small businesses. And your small business, in case you're unaware, is determined by your NAICS code, typically by the number of employees you have, which is typically under 500, and then in some cases by your annual average income, which is, I think the threshold typically is around $14 million. So in many cases, most cases with Vermont small businesses, you qualify. Oh. So what are the situations where an SBIR is the best thing to look for? Well, when your team includes a university or other type of research institution as a subcontractor, but do not have a nonprofit research entity in your project as a subcontractor. So these SBIRs are really for not for nonprofits. They're for for-profit organizations and small businesses. If you decide to subcontract to a research institution but don't need to subcontract more than 33% of a phase 1 research effort to the RI. If potential investors don't want to involve a nonprofit in a project, that's another place where the SBIRs are good. And there's sorry about that. And if potential investors don't want to involve a nonprofit in the project, if the personnel at the research institution would prefer to participate in the project rather than as an independent consultant rather than as reps of the university or federal laboratory, you will not qualify for an STTR as there is no nonprofit RI acting as a subcontractor. So that means you would want to be SBIR in any of those cases. It's not it is any. So any one of those triggers needing to go to STTR. With the STTRs, one of the things you want to remember is setting up your team. With any of these applications here, it's critical not just to have a great topic and a great innovative idea, but it's also to have a great team. In order to have the best team for an STTIR, you need to subcontract more than 33%. The STTR allows up to 60% of the research and development to go to the nonprofit RI. Up to 60%. That doesn't mean necessarily 60%. The guidelines for STTR specifically state that the small business must perform 40% of the work on the project, and the research institution must perform at least 30% of the R&D. So the other 30% really can go to either the RI or can come back to you. The small business and research institutions in this case, would be equal partners on the project. Again, STTR is described as a collaboration between the two, suggesting the players are equals even though the award always goes to the small business, and that firm must maintain overall control and has responsibility for the project. With STTRs, there is also a greater probability of winning when teamed with an RI. And again, it's important to team with an RI that really has experience with STTRs as well. If a topic of interest is restricted to an STTR response, of course, then it would be best to go with an STTR. And this is, I think, the meat of what we're talking about today. Now that we've gotten the history and the what are the programs out of the way, is where do you find these topics, the grant and grant offerings. If you have your laptop with you at this time, or if you want to split your screen or whatever you want to do, there are a couple of places that are really good. Grants.gov is considered old faithful but it's somewhat limited as it only searches for grants. And unfortunately, a lot of the SBIR and STTR grants aren't on grants.gov or sometimes don't show up on there. And the majority of the awards that are done for SBIR and STTRs are actually contracts, so they don't show up on grants.gov either. So the two really good sites are SBIR.gov and Zin.com. Both of these search across the grants and contracts, and each of these can and usually does show some slightly different results. When searching for a topic, you always want to start broad and drill down. This typically brings better results and allows for more possible matches. So if you start with, tank parts, and then you go from tank parts down to tracks, or you go from tank parts down to deck-mounted guns. This is just an example, and go down through. If it's medical equipment, you start with medical equipment, then you go to lab equipment, then you go from lab equipment to lab glass equipment. I mean, you can go right down through, and each time you do, the results are going to get better and better. And within the topics, you can find words that you can drill down with as well. The 3 steps, again, to finding the best topic is an honest assessment of your fit with an agency topic. You don't want to do one of these searches and look at the topic and say, well, I could do that if I got the right people, and I got a subcontractor to do this, and I got a subcontractor to do that, and I got a subcontractor to do that. You want to look at what you do and what you do best, and look at topics and do your drill down to really nail good, solid topics that you really have an opportunity to compete on. Another one is review any of the literature cited or references available. One of the really good things to do is to actually go in and look at some of the awards that have been made and older topics that have been awarded, which you can do on, say, an SBIR.gov. You can search for awarded opportunities as well as open.
Ed, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
So, and forgive me if I missed something, but I guess I'm a little confused, because when I think of an SBIR grant or something, I think of it as coming in and out of the grant applicant, and the proposal is solely centered on what that small business and potentially research institution partner are trying to investigate. Are you saying there's a way in which a small business can sort of go through a different list where they're reviewing different topics that maybe are of interest to some of the funding partners?
Absolutely, and we're going to get there, and I'll show you. I'm actually going to show you how to do it.
Oh, cool.
The
Thank
trick
you.
is, like I said, with these SBIR grants, you actually have an opportunity. You find the topic, and you actually have an opportunity to work with the topic author to hone and tweak that topic to better suit your research skills and your innovation. It's
Okay.
really the contracts where the contract type of grants where they more or less tell you what to do. And often with the straight grants, like the NIH grants, a lot of times people will find those topics and they'll make the mistake of not talking with the topic author early in the process and tweaking that and working with them to understand it better before they even turn their topic response in.
So does a proposal have to have a defined topic, or can the topic be defined by the proposal?
No. In these SBIRs, you have to find a topic. That's how these work. They're not. What you have to do is find a topic that's suitable to what you do. But some of the contract ones, broad agency announcements, and those type of things, those actually pose questions of, we're looking for this, we're looking for that, those type of things, and you can respond to those with what you want to do for research.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry for the interruption, but
No
thanks
worries.
for clarification.
I can take some questions even after. I can stay a little long if anybody needs to for more questions. So again, you want to establish, when you're doing these topics, you want to establish a dialogue with the topic author. With some agencies, you can't talk about the TA to the TA once the solicitation is open, like NASA and DOT. With others, you can talk to the TA during the pre-release period, like Department of Defense and DHS. With some agencies, you can talk with the TA at any time, which is great. NIH, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. So those are the really great opportunities there. So let's take a look at how one would go about finding these topics. We'll use SBIR.gov as an example. So what you do, and I've got the little link up top, you go to SBIR.gov and you would click on, and this is, you see how on the solicitation it says closed topics? Okay, those are basically awarded. You can go to look at what has been awarded in the past. You can also go to future to get forecasting on what they're thinking they might look for each agency in the future. So for this search today, we're going to look at open topics, just so you can see how you can locate those. You can also look down below. There's specific areas for health-related funding and sensor technology. Those are real hot topics right now, so they have their own thing. So once you click on that open, you're going to get to this, and if you see, there's already over on the right-hand side, again, these are the hot ones, so they pop right up. If you scroll down, through here, wait a minute, did I miss a page? Nope. If you scroll down through, what you're going to see is, oh, I see what I did. I had clicked 2018. See down very on the bottom where it says year? I had clicked on 2018. It goes all the way back to like 2012 or earlier. But in this case, I had done 2018 open topics, which produced 59 results. And this is what the results look like on the right. It's going to tell you what the release date was, the opening date, the due date, and the close date. The important thing to look at is and it'll tell you if it's one of these grant opportunities and you look at the topic and you find out, like this one is Department of Health and Human Services through the National Institute of Health. Those, once that's released, you can start talking with the topic author. Okay? all the way through and before the opening date, you can talk to the topic author without anybody knowing what you're talking about. Okay? Once the solicitation is open, between then and due date, any questions you ask or dialogue you have is going to become public. It's posted and people can see the question answers. So really, once you want to look for those ones that the release date or the departments are allowing you to talk about those topics ahead of time. Another thing you'll notice in there, you can filter by agency, and if you're on your own, you can scroll. If you're on your own computer, you can scroll down through and you can see practically the agencies. It's like 16, but if you look at all the different departments within the agencies, there is a boatload. You can also search for phase 1 or phase 2, and you can also break it down by SBIR or STTR. Now, the great thing, and that's just simple, you can do on your own. But I would recommend that for those listening or those in RT's position that may run into people that have an innovative idea, that they get together with the PTAC, because there is some more detailed information on these SBIR and STTRs that can be real useful both in finding and in applying for these different sorts of grants and contracts. So if there are any questions, I can answer any questions if you have any.
Ed, are there, I think I know the answer to this. Many of these, or correct me if I'm wrong, many of these are often tied to university-related projects. Is that correct?
If it's an STTR.
Okay, so the SBIRs, if I remember from a few slides ago, they don't have to be associated with a research institution.
That's right. Actually, if we go back, the STTRs do not have a nonprofit research entity. So typically, universities are not. It says the team includes a university or another type of research institution. So as long as it isn't a nonprofit entity, yeah, they typically include a university, but it only needs to subcontract like 33% of the innovation and research to the university. And you maintain your intellectual property. So say you want, and actually you probably want to link up with a UVM or a Duke or somebody like that because they have won a number of these or may actually have some in place that you can jump into. That's another good way when you do these closed topics. This is another good way to market your business and do opportunity trolling is what I call it, where you go in and you find out, you do topic searches and find out who was awarded the SBIRs, and then you can reach out to those awardees with your innovation that may make their innovation better.
So if I read number 1 on this slide, I interpret that as saying it's desired, it's more highly desired if your team includes a university or other type of research institution, but is it required? Is it required?
It's not required. Mm-hmm. It's not required.
And I guess the reason why I'm really kind of hitting on that is in southern Vermont, there is no primary research institution.
Well, but right over the border, there's one for medical. That would be would be Dartmouth, and it doesn't just have to be federally funded research development. It doesn't have to even be an RI or a university. You could partner with another small business that's done a number of R&D projects, like say an Omega Optical or a Chroma, some of these different larger entities in Vermont that have actually won these type of awards in the past. And you could be the principal
Vermont Photonics has done the same.
Yeah, and you could be GS Precision, and you could be the principal investigator and subcontract out certain amounts of that project. But just remember, if you do partner with a research institution, a university or some other federally funded R&D center, that you don't have to subcontract more than 33%.
Okay, all right, that helps a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have that it's 12:36. Ed, I don't want to cut you off, but I know these are typically scheduled for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of material. It was super informative.
I just have one again. Shameless plug. Take a look at PTAC.vermont.gov, or if you have questions on the program, more detailed questions, give me a shout out at ed.williams@vermont.gov. I would be more than happy to help out and answer direct questions and maybe help you out a little bit more with becoming a client or with learning more about these programs. So with that, I'm all set, Archie. You can blast me off.
All right. Well, Ed, thanks so much. I just want to take 3 seconds to ask if there's any questions out there. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box.
All right. Now, the one thing I'll ask too, Archie, as a wrap-up, is if you could send me the recording and an attendance list so I can forward that up to my boss in Montpelier.
Absolutely. Well, Ed, thanks so much, and I'm going to just take the opportunity to plug the next meeting, which is July 11th, I believe, and the title is What is Labor Market Information and How Can It Support My Business, Research, or Project? Ed, once again, thanks so much for participating in this edition of Knowledge Bites.
You bet. Thank you very much.